Good afternoon. Another video at the old Straight-n-Strop shop. This day is meant for God, so we will give God his dues, and then we will worry about razors. Last video, we were on this mashup between an old Wade pre-1890. If the hallmark on a Wade only says Sheffield and not Sheffield, England, it was made before 1890. All razors after that say Sheffield, England. So when we left, we have the focus scales that we pulled the inlay off of. We sanded down, got them to look halfway decent. They're still nice and flat. Now, something I've also found out when sanding or cleaning or polishing, whatever you may be doing to these scales, if you have them on a flat surface and you get to doing a back and forwards motion on them, what will happen is you will actually get them to raise up. The heat and the motion, it's kind of like taking a strip of paper and running it across a 90-degree edge. Makes it curl up. The same thing will happen to a set of scales, and you'll end up with scales that are bent like so. So, as you can see, they already do that a little bit from the natural form of them. Just a side note. So here we're going to do is, first and foremost, we're going to start with making a pin. These are my own design. The anvil. The curved surface allows me to straighten shears, tangs. If there's a bend in the tang, having this curved surface to hammer on allows that. Of course, the flat for pinning. This is another design of my own. It's just a piece of square stock, and I have tapped 2 holes in it, and one hole creates a pin that long, and the other hole creates a pin that long. So no matter what, if you're using certain scales that might be thicker than others, when I go to use these scales, they have a slight thickness to them, which makes it a longer pin. Dovo scales are thick. But this just kind of helps me save on my brass, all right? And it also holds it when peening. So what I can actually do is just drop it in there and nip it right above it, all right? Now we've got a little edge there. Next, we're going to file that down. It doesn't have to be completely perfect. All right, so next I'll bring out, I don't typically use jeweler's hammers. I have antique ball peen hammers, 8, 4, 3. Now the 4 and the 3 have a more prominent point. They're perfect for tightening up the scales on razors that aren't being rebuilt, where you can just get that little edge right around the pin. And that edge I'm talking about is just there. So taking one of those smaller ball peens with the prominent point and just rolling around that will tighten it up without having to put a lot of hammer into it. But when it comes to a repinning and I'm trying to get a peen top, I'll always go for my 8-ounce. I typically use this one more than any other. And it doesn't take much, depending on what kind of pin you're using, or color you're using, I'm sorry. That will be enough. Now, if you get to smacking these too hard, what you will do is create a pressure bulge right below the peened area. I'm not going to do that to prove that point. Just trust me. It creates a pressure bulge. And what happens with a pressure bulge is, let me find a washer here real quick for a demonstration. What happens with a pressure bulge is that you'll get it to, say, there, and it will stop. And it won't go all the way to the end like you want, or like you really need. Your collar will be there, and when you go to set the pin and peen it, finally, you'll have that little extra. And if you have too much, it's gonna look horrible. So I've had a couple of guys ask me about using a pin's width. So taking a nondescript piece of pin and that be your distance that you would cut it off. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But I do not suggest that. Let me find a razor here. All right. Well, that's not going to be the one I wanted, but maybe it'll be close. No. I don't think I have any that are like that, but what you end up having is a rather large mushroom that comes over top of your collar. So, I mean, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a collar that sits toward the end and has minimal pin, to where it's just enough? All right. So let me see if I can get a good view of that. So you can have a collar that looks like this. Zoom in. There we go. Or you can have one where it's mushroomed over the top of it. And we don't want that. We don't want that. We want it to look nice and clean. So there you go. And as you can see, certain ones, the hardware that I typically use is, it's machined out of solid brass. It's not, oh, here, let me grab a larger one so you can see. It's machined, so it's not stamped. Therefore, it doesn't need a choke washer. It doesn't need an under washer. Let me find one that is stamped, and I'll show you what I mean by that for those that don't know. This is a stamped collar. And before that color goes on onto the razor, you'll put it on your pin, like so. You'll have to use a choke washer, which is just a tiny little washer. Hang on, I'm having some difficulties here. Tiny little washer. Awesome. And that will have to go on like so for it to work properly. With the machined colors, and I offer these on the store and through my Insta. Those are machined solid brass. You don't need the choke washer. Just the color. So we'll get that started. That's the beginning of the peening. Make one of these. If you do this kind of work and you would like it to be easy, something like this is a lifesaver. Okay, so before we get to going any further with that, no, I don't make those anvils No, I don't sell them. I think this is the one we decided to use. I don't know if that's going to work right. We'll see. It's just not quite enough. I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll reach in the box of goodies and we'll find one that does. How about that? I try to keep these videos to a minimum 12 minutes or so. That way people don't get bored. I don't know. I don't really understand it, but that's the way everybody likes to see. So if I don't have a piece of lead that can cover that, what we'll do is we'll make up for it with something. I'm just trying to find out how wide I need this spacer / wedge to be. Yeah, so it needs to be wider than that. I think, man, I'm just thinking that that's going to work just fine. We'll nip that off. We'll make sure it flushes up over here on the top, so when you're holding the razor, it'll be flush. But if there's a little bit of space down there, it's probably not going to hurt anything. So we'll see. That's the 12-minute mark. I'll make another one and keep going. Probably do a little bit of work on this wedge. I'll tape it.